Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. On our podcast today, we have two women authors that have co-written a book called Changemakers, Women Who Boldly Built Zion. What a cool title for a book, and what needed work. And those authors are McArthur, Krishna, and Ann Pimentel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us. You're such a change maker yourself. This is the perfect dovetailing of someone who is a change maker celebrating the change making book. So thank you for that.
Let me just read a little bit about the book. The book is a powerful and much needed affirmation, especially in a moment where women are quietly wondering if they fit. Through stories from the scripture and global history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint, it highlights women whose ideas, faith, and courage have helped shape the church in a meaningful and lasting way. The book is accessible to children, beautiful to look at, and meaningful for readers of all ages. Both of these women, McArthur has written over 20 books, including A Girl's Guide to Heavenly Mother and Girls Who Choose God series. Anne is a co-founder of Meeting House Mosaic, an organization working to diversify Christian art and amplify voices that sometimes go unheard in our faith community. And so I just think this is a terrific book, and I'm honored to have these women on the podcast. McArthur is joining us from her home in Oregon. She may have been on just the prior episode or two with other women authors. She has 3 girls, and Anne is joining us from her home in Utah. She is the mother of 4 boys. Anne has a degree from BYU in marriage and family human development, and McArthur has an undergraduate degree from BYU and a master's in communication. The book we're talking about in the show notes, it'll be at Deseret Book and also at Amazon. We'll also put Anne's Instagram handle there in case you want to find Anne. Reach out to her, and for McArthur, we'll put her Instagram and Facebook. So with that, we said a prayer before we started, and we hope this book is just helpful to women and men and people that are just looking for principles to create Zion and valuing voices we sometimes don't hear, and what we can do kind of on the front lines sometimes of the church to create Zion and improve the church for not only us, but for other Latter-day Saints. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anne and McArthur to introduce the book.
Yeah, so I was taking a step back from some of my Heavenly Mother work and was thinking about what does it mean to be an ongoing restoration? What does that look like? What is entailed with that? I love President Nelson talking about it's going to be a wild ride, take your vitamins, right? And I was thinking about where the hurdles were in that understanding. And that dovetailed with thinking about some of the recent trend we've seen where women are leaving our faith. And what came to my mind was that we had an opportunity as a people to decide whether or not we were going to embrace change. So are we going to stay and think exactly where we are is where God intended? This is where I am. This is how things are. This is where God wants it to be. That's a frequent comment you hear online. This is the way it is because this is the way God intended. Or are we going to truly embrace our history and our trajectory of people who change, of an institution that changes? If we believe truly the ongoing restoration is in process and is not finished, that means change has to happen. And so to me, we kind of had this tug of war between these two camps. And it's not that I'm trying to polarize. People are in, it's not two camps, it's a spectrum, right? People can be in lots of different places on there and even on different topics. But I thought it was really important that since I'm a person who really believes in the ongoing restoration and really believes that we as people and as institutions are always changing, whether it's fast or slow. I love the quote. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get the name wrong. It was in my head and it left. Perimenopausal brain. But she said she loves to work with her enemies because at any moment they could change their minds. And I could dig out the name of the woman who said that for you. I had it in front of my eyeballs yesterday. But it's such a powerful idea to say that we as humans are always growing. That is literally the point of Earth life, that we could always be changing and growing. And so I wanted to create a book that celebrated growth, that showed that growth was happening, that growth had always been happening, and that women played a crucial role in that growth. Elder Karen recently released a video where a young person asked them about getting revelation. And I loved his answer. He said, Revelation is scattered. That was the word he used, scattered. And I think that we need to be really clear that President Nelson and the 12 apostles have the stewardship to say whether or not revelation will become a policy in the handbook, etc. But everyone in our church has the opportunity to receive revelation and how to do something a little different or a little better. And we have a very rich history showing this exact idea. So I got all excited about this. But honestly, I work better with a team because I like having a thought partner and a buddy and someone to be excited with me. And so I started kind of looking around the landscape of people who I knew were change makers and who are beautiful writers and were just fun to be around because that's a criteria, right? And I was like, oh, Anne. So I hit her up.
Yeah, and I am so glad that she did. I think that one of the things that really drew me to this project was that as women in the church, well, as people in the church, we don't know the women's stories as much. We know a lot about the men in the church that have made change. There's formats to learn those stories and to know, who our past prophets were, and the apostles and all the people that have made change in the church, but women have been there the whole time and have been doing things actively to help the church grow and progress. And so I thought it was great to bring out these stories of women from around the world. We wanted to make sure that this was a representational story book, that had women from all parts of our church. Because like McArthur said, the revelation is scattered. And so the stories can come from any corner of the world. But I thought
And
it
I
was
think
really,
that's something really uplifting, right? Is that everyone can participate in building Zion. This is an invitation.
yeah. So I thought it was really important to bring out these stories and to search for them. And it was actually kind of a fun full circle moment when we learned that a lot of these church stories of the women, the history of the women, came from Melissa Inouye. She was a church historian who was working on the global histories, and she realized that most of the stories that had been gathered were about men. And so she started an effort to find the women's stories, the first Relief Society president, the first primary president of different countries. And so she's one of the people that helped get all of these stories here. And then while we were writing the book, she actually passed away. And we immediately, that day, we were like, oh, we are adding Melissa to our book. And so it was a full circle moment to add her in to kind of finish off this history that she brought about.
And it's beautiful because I think she also is a great emulator of what you can do within your sphere, right? And so I'm not a church historian. That's not my talent or my role. And so she looked around the landscape where she was and said, what can I do a little bit different here to be more expansive and more inclusive? And in her role, she was able to accomplish so many things on this, right? That she started a historian conference in Mexico to say people in Mexico should be writing their own church histories. We in Salt Lake should not be writing the history of Mexico. Let's let the people write their own histories. And so you just think about where you are and what you're passionate about. So people always ask us, right? Like, how do I make change? What do I do? I'm not a church historian, but I think that Anne and I and Melissa and you all have found something that we're passionate about, something that gives us spark or energy or that we care about. And then we looked around the landscape and thought, what can I do about this? Right. And it's amazing to me because it doesn't require, mostly it just requires oomph, right? Like it requires the energy to say, I'm going to tackle this. Right. In fact, I work with a group of women on Heavenly Mother, and we're always looking for oomph. So if someone listens to this podcast and they think, ooh, I care about that, well, get in touch with me because we can put you to work, right? There are always things in this world that need a helping hand. And if you look around right now, there's so many people who are in need and so many situations that need energy. And so I think that being LDS, it's actually pretty beautiful. Stephen Colbert just hosted Jacinda, the ex Prime Minister of New Zealand, and he asked her about being raised Mormon and her LDS heritage. And she said, she gave such a lovely compliment. So she's no longer practicing, she's no longer following, but she gave such a lovely compliment because she says, we were raised with the spirit of service. We were raised that service is how you live your life. And her parents were such a good model to her of that. And so I think change making is about service, right? You're looking around in a community and trying to figure out where to serve because something needs to be done different.
It's interesting you brought up Jacinda because I wrote her name down about 3 minutes before you brought her up, and just thought, for some reason she came to my mind as this wonderful, capable LDS woman who no longer practices. We had the chance to hear her speak at a Harvard graduation a few years ago, and she kind of brought up her Mormon heritage in a positive way. And so I thought she was just one of my worldwide heroes for what she's done in New Zealand and her values and her perspective. And I mourn she's not part of our church, and that I'm not critical of Jacinda. I'm wondering what we could have done to better support Jacinda and other really capable LDS women who leave our church and that we don't have their gifts and perspectives. So that's kind of a side discussion. But keep talking about the book, and maybe you'll share examples in the book of women who bravely did something that were change makers. But I'll let you drive the direction of the podcast.
And in the book, we wanted a range, right? Because there are people who are changing because they have access or they have a particular role. There are other women who just decided, right, that prayed and felt inspired and stepped into something with no official role. So some of the ones that are maybe a little bit more obvious, but maybe not. The Relief Society and the primary wouldn't exist if women hadn't felt inspired to do this. That revelation came to a woman first, and then eventually, in the case of the primary, got adopted 3 years later by the general church. So for 3 years, this woman and her bishop and the parents, and she actually worked with Eliza R. Snow as well, to set up the primary and get it up and running. And then the institution of the church saw that it was useful and good, and so they adopted it. But if you think about this, like think about how powerfully impacting the primary program has been for so long. And that came because a woman had a good idea, right? And so I think about we shouldn't limit ourselves to thinking that good ideas only flow from God to a narrow place, right? Like that truly our heavenly parents' ability to transform is universal and that these good ideas can touch anyone. So some of the examples in the book are that that institutional, I would say, and then some of the other examples in the book are just women who made a significant difference or a creative difference because they used their talents in a different way. And do you want to talk about your family because that's so cool?
Yeah. So as I was researching Adele Cannon Howells, she was the fourth primary president, fourth general primary president. She's the one that is responsible for commissioning Arnold Freeberg to do the artwork that was in the Book of Mormon, is in the Book of Mormon. All of those muscular, strapping men in the Book of Mormon. But the thing that is cool is that she had asked the church for money to fund it, and they said, no, this isn't something we want to do right now. But she knew that art was important for kids. She knew that kids needed to connect with the Book of Mormon through art, and And so on her deathbed, she signed over her family land to pay for the pieces, to commission Arnold to do those pieces. And so it was literally on her deathbed that she signed that over. And so as I was researching her, I thought, well, I have Cannon in my family name. I wonder if we're related. So I looked her up on Family Search, and it turns out she's my great grandaunt.
Wow.
I had never known that. I called my mom and I was like, why have I not known that this is our family? But anyway, so it was really cool to realize, that she's in my family, but to have that example of change, to be so passionate about something that you work on it your whole life and that you dedicate your life to it, and do anything that you can to make it happen. I think that is such an amazing example. And not everybody is going to be on their deathbed finalizing the change that they've been working for, but it's just such an example of perseverance and working hard at something.
And think about this, like, okay, now I'm about to get into all sorts of crazy speculation, just for the record. But think about, like, this woman knew that art was so important because art gets burned into our brains. Like, I don't know about you, but Wicked King Noah will forever be that man sitting in that chair with the leopards. I mean, like, it is solidly in my brain. So she understood the power of this generations ago, and now here's Anne working in Meeting House Mosaic because she understands the power of art and how we worship and how we identify and how we feel welcome and how we feel loved by God. And so think about this genetic connection. Or maybe, the fourth general primary president came down and touched Anne's brain, and said, hello, my great grand, niece. This is something that you too. So isn't that interesting that in the same genetic line are these two women who are using the same tool to further build Zion in their way? I just think that's really incredible. Unknown to each other, right? I mean, maybe she knows about Anne, but Anne didn't know about her. So
That's really cool. I wasn't aware. I was aware about the Relief Society, but I was not aware about the primary until maybe 5 or 10 years ago. That started as a program, on the front lines and got adopted church-wide. So I don't know if there's kind of two categories of change making. One that becomes an institutional thing like Primary Relief Society, and others that are, more just a ward or a community or a stake or not even an official organizational thing, just things that women, and I'm sensitive to women that feel muted sometimes and turn to a man for permission to do something, and maybe they get shut down at that point and it never happens. Maybe I've been guilty of that. And so there's probably examples of things that women have just either done on their own or have gotten, if they needed priesthood, okay, or that's kind of a statement. And the question, maybe there's examples of those you want to share, and maybe there's thoughts you want to share for women who feel they want to do something but aren't quite sure the next steps to do it.
Yeah. We, so that primary president was Aurelia Spencer Rogers. I think we need to say her name for the work that she did. Yeah, we've been referring to these different sort of areas of change as institutional change and cultural change.
Good.
And so I think there is a lot of work that we can do with cultural change. I work a lot in anti-racism and trying to bring awareness to the needs of people of color in the church. And I when I first was like really fired up about this, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to my stake president. I'm going to go right to the top that I can connect to and, get my stake president on board. And so I talked to him and he shot me down. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to the Stake Relief Society president. She's in my ward. I can talk to her. She didn't buy in either. And so I was like, oh, what do I do? And so I was talking to a friend, another woman, and I said, how do we make change if we can't get our leaders to do this? And she said, if you can't get a leader to do it, then just start in your own backyard. You don't need permission to do something in your own house. And so you can host a fireside or, a discussion or a dessert night or, whatever it is that you have that ability to do, because we all can make change in our own ways. It's not going to look the same for anybody. And so find what you're passionate about, what you can, what area you're comfortable starting something, and then start working at it. And I eventually I've done both of those things. I went to my bishop and we did get an official fireside in the ward, but I've also hosted discussions in my home with different couples. And my husband is a great baker, and so we have dessert that he makes, and then we have this race discussion, and it has helped just kind of get things out into the ward. It's not an official thing, but it just, one by one, it's working with people to help that understanding happen. And so I would encourage anybody that wants to make change, just start something with your friends, talk to one person, talk to a group of friends, whatever it is. We have the power to make change little by little.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. And frankly, I don't think, I mean, okay, right, I'm about to giggle. There's a woman in our book who did Christian yoga as a way to spread the gospel. Now, I don't think our missionaries are ever going to get trained in yoga. That's why I'm giggling. I'm having a hard time imagining this like host of yoga teachers going out to like, preach the good word. But for that woman in that sphere, she started doing summer camps in a place where religion was actually not allowed to even be discussed. And she was able to bring the principles of the good news of the gospel to lots of people. Over 100 people ended up actually eventually being baptized, but over 100 people and thousands of others that she just touched for good through the mechanism of yoga, like, because that was her thing and that was her access point in order to spread beautiful truths. And so some things will be adopted and some things won't ever be. But it's the measure of whether or not something is good is not whether or not it's institutionally adopted. The measure of whether or not something is good is whether or not it blesses lives. And so I think that we have to be aware of how we like stick our oar in, right? I mean, we truly believe in being anxiously engaged in a good cause. And I think that there's just so much latitude for whatever someone is passionate about. Um, and I think that there's always people might say like I'm not an organizer, right? I'm not a baker like Anne's husband, right? But I think that whatever someone's talent is, there's always a way to do good with that talent. I really believe that our heavenly parents gave us spiritual gifts for to use them, to apply them. And I think whatever it is, if that spiritual gift is just being kind, there's room for that, right? And so having an understanding, maybe take a catalog of like, what are my spiritual gifts, and where do those dovetail with the needs of the world?
Yeah, James Jones made an amazing anti-racism course, Anti-Racism 101. You can find it on a website. Just Google that and it'll come up. In that course, he has um, I think it was four different types of advocates, different work that you can do within activism or advocacy work. And one of them is a leader, starting out being on the front lines, but another one is the helper, somebody that's behind the scenes, printing off flyers or writing the poster boards or, whatever it is. And so if, like McArthur's saying, if you're not the one that can organize or set up things, attend the things that are set up and be a support in that way. And that type of allyship, that type of support is just as important as the person that is out on the front lines,
So
being the face of something.
I have an example for you. So this video will be, I mean, this podcast will be posted in a timely way. Then this won't be evergreen. But for example, at the Faith Matters Restore conference, we had a Heavenly Mother booth last year. This year, the woman can't do it because her life has shifted and changed. I don't live in Utah. So we are specifically looking for someone who can help set up a booth. Right. So to me, this is not like I have to have a skill set to write a book or I have to have a skill set, to create a protest march, right? Like, this is someone who's like, I can drive a car and go pick up some materials, right? I can stop by Staples and pick something up. I mean, it's someone just with a willing heart. One of the things I love about God and our scriptures is the celebration of the willing heart, right? If you are willing, God can magnify. And so, from my thinking, being a change maker is just about being willing, right? Being willing, having the time to step in and say, hey, count on me. Like, I can do this. And for me, that means, I mean, I understand different people have different life circumstances. Your time may be consumed with children or taking care of parents or sickness. Like, I understand that. I'm not throwing a guilt trip that direction. But if you have time on your hands, then it takes a willing heart and you can be a change maker.
This is terrific, listeners. I don't have any new content to share, but I love the idea, spiritual gifts that McArthur talks about. And I sometimes worry that I'm an LGBTQ ally. To feel like you're an ally, you've got to write books and start a podcast and speak. And I've always felt that, that's been my road, and I'm honored to be on that road. But I think most of the heavy lifting or most of the good work is doing what I would, coin that Ann just said. The backyard principle, I wrote that in big caps on my notes, is that's where, I think that's where a lot of the work occurs in this allyship space to better support women, Black Latter-day Saints, stamp out racism, LGBTQ people, is these one-on-one or these backyard groups that meet and talk like a book club and yeah, maybe that's even not your deal, but I think if you're trying to be an ally, don't compare yourself to other allies and feel like you're not measuring up or you're not doing something grand, because I really think it's the one-on-one conversations that happen in ward council or happen after a Relief Society or elders quorum, or when a mom learns she's got a kiddo that's gay, you're there to just sit with her and talk about that. So this is really, I really very much agree with the framework. And yeah, maybe we'll change something institutionally, but I think it's more likely, I've always liked the idea that we should focus on what we can control. And institutionally, that's pretty difficult for us rank and file members. And so sometimes when we step in a new space, we want to write, the prophet or the 12, or even meet with the stake president like Ann did. And a lot of that leads to frustration because nothing happens. It's just the reality of an institutional church. But I think where, I don't know, heavy lifting is the right word, but where the heart-changing work can happen is in our circle of influence. And often that can be a ward or a stake, or it can be whatever our circle of influence is, the different circles we've created to better support others. So that's terrific. Keep sharing stuff that's on your mind.
I think one story that I really like in our book is from the Bible. We pulled in 2 stories of women from the Bible because we wanted to kind of give that span of Christianity that, has changed. And they technically are not part of the LDS faith, but we wanted to include them anyway. So this is the story of Lois and Eunice. They're a mother and daughter, and they are the mother. The mother is Timothy, she's the mother of Timothy. I think it's Eunice is the mother of Timothy, who becomes the missionary who goes off with Paul. And so these women were really, really special because in a time when women had even more restrictions than we do now, these women were educated in scripture. I don't know if they knew how to read. It more likely was through oral stories that they had learned these scriptures. But they were well-versed in the scriptures. And so from a young age, it says in the scriptures that Timothy from a young age was learning about the scriptures and was understanding the things of God. And it was because of Lois and Eunice. And so that is a very small change from the outside, to just teach your children the gospel, to teach your children the important things of God. But the impact that had on Timothy specifically was huge, and he was able to become a powerful missionary to help Paul. But that is something that, as a mother, it helps me to realize that the conversations that I have with my kids and um, the things that I can help them learn is that's just going to spread out into the world through my boys. And so when I teach them of their heavenly mother or of a loving God that is full of grace, or, something that is impactful and meaningful to me, they're going to understand that and take that message out, and it will just multiply as it goes down our family line. And so that's a little bit of change that is approachable for everybody. Everybody can talk and can, converse with their children, or if you don't have children, with your coworkers, or your siblings, or whatever it is. We all have somebody that we can talk to and share our feelings with. Um, and even that small thing, like you were saying, Richard, of the heart work, the changing hearts and minds, that comes through conversation. And I don't think we should discount the power that those conversations can have.
This is a side question, Anne, but tell us why you care about, racism and how you connected with that topic and why that's passionate for you.
Yeah.
You're not Black.
I am not. And for most of my life, I was unaware of race issues. Early in 2020, before COVID started, I read a book. I participated in a compassion challenge. It was a 10-day compassion challenge where we learned how to have compassion and empathy for people and just kind of focused on that. But one of the speakers was Valerie Kaur. She is part of the Sikh religion. She's an activist and an author, and she wrote this amazing book called See No Stranger. And in that book, she talks about a message from a guru that she grew up listening to, or her parents were teaching her what this guru had said. And that message was, "You are a part of me that I do not yet know." And she encouraged everybody to wonder about people instead of having these first judgments about people when we see them, to meet them with wonder and say, "I wonder why they did that. I wonder what brought them to this point in their lives." And so as COVID started, and then the murder of George Floyd, I feel like I had been prepared at that point to finally understand and have empathy and curiosity about what was actually happening in our world. And so that just set me down a path of a racial awakening. There's really no other way to say it, but to realize my whiteness, something I knew I was white, obviously, but I never really understood the impact that had in my life and what that meant that I could do. And then I really, for the first time, saw Black people and saw people of color that they were having different experiences than I was having. And so it just set me on a path to learn more. Education was huge. I was a sponge, just reading as much as I could and listening to new voices and new perspectives. And so that really helped me to be where I am today.
I brought some tears to my eyes. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Keep sharing about your book or things that you're passionate about.
McArthur, you should talk about Ada and Mercedes. Ada and Mercedes.
Ada and Mercedes. They were a hoot. Ada and Mercedes were two women in the Dominican Republic who were so gregarious and charismatic that they ended up on a reality TV cooking show. This was prime time, like 6 p.m. every night, all over Dominican Republic. The first lady of the DR complimented them on their show, right? Like this was a very, very big deal. Not in the days now where we have like 1,000 channels and like it could just be hidden. This was like one of the top shows in the entire nation. And they would stand behind their cutting boards and would say, "Yes, brought to you by the Sisters of the Relief Society of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints."
Wow.
And they would have primary children coming on sing and sister missionaries come on and talk. And they would literally like cut vegetables and teach you how to make pineapple fritters while teaching about gospel principles. And the station got so many letters from people curious about this that when missionaries finally came to the country and started actually contacting people, they had bags of mail of people to follow up on that were interested in hearing more about what these women emulated, what these women shared. And I love the story for so many reasons. I love the story because they're completely shameless, right? Like, who are these women? I love this story because it uses tools. Tools, media is not good or bad. It's just how you use it, right? And that they have a talent that is completely not mine. You cannot get me to cut a vegetable in a kitchen. Like, that is not ever where you will find me. And so the fact that like everyone has a different talent and everyone has a different opportunity and just sheer enthusiasm kind of gets you through the day. I just love that these women were able to be so impactful. And no one called them. No one called them to do this. This was not officially set up. This was two women with enthusiasm.
Yep, they're pretty amazing. And Ada has passed away, but Mercedes is still alive, and she lives here in Utah somewhere. And I have a goal to find her and take her our book.
So if you know this woman, to message Anne and see if we can connect Anne to one of her heroes.
Yep.
That's
Right.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, McArthur.
I just think that we have such a rich opportunity right now. If you look at the landscape of our faith and our world, we have an opportunity to choose. We have an opportunity to choose. Our baptismal covenants say that we will mourn with those that mourn. So recently, I was in a discussion group, and I talked about some women who were leaving the church. And one of the women in the group's reaction was, well, they're silly and full of nonsense. And it broke my heart a little bit to hear that perspective. Because to me, that's a choice. And I'm not trying to put this woman down, but just to talk about choices, that's a choice to not have curiosity, right? So Anne was talking about that she had taken this course on being compassion, and that opened something inside of her to be curious about people who were different than her. And I think when you have compassion and curiosity, then your landscape shifts. And instead of seeing someone in a condemning way, right, for whatever situation they're in, whether it's LGBTQ, whether or not it's women's issues, whether or not it's race, whatever it is, I think that we have an opportunity to choose curiosity and compassion. We have an opportunity to choose to live up to our baptismal covenants. If someone is leaving our faith, it's probably because it's painful, right? And if it's painful, doesn't it behoove us to ask why, right? To ask about what that experience is. If someone is different than you, they're having it, even if they're the same as you. Like two women in the church, even of the same generation, of the same place, can have a very different experience. And so, not assuming that our experience is universal, right? That Anne said she realized her whiteness gave her a different experience in this world than others were having. And so for me, the mourn with those who mourn, comfort those who stand in need of comfort. That baptismal comfort isn't that baptismal covenant is an invitation to care about people and that their situations are different than ours. And if all the change making we do is just to be less judgmental, right? So when someone posts up in a comment, here's the experience I'm having, instead of having this hard, quick, how dare you, right? That's not it, yada, yada. To have a moment of compassion to say, oh, this person has experienced something different than me, or sees the world different than me, or maybe needs some compassion. To me, we don't have to agree with people, but we have to make a choice about whether or not we're going to honor our covenants, to mourn, to comfort, to be compassionate, to be curious. I know curious is not part of the covenant. I got that. I think those lead to curiosity of other people. And so this Changemaker book, to me, is an invitation to people to say, one, is change good, right? Do we believe in the ongoing restoration? Two, where do I believe change can come from? Can I honor that change and the inspiration, as Elder Kieran said, is scattered, right? Three, what in the landscape needs work? So, just to point out maybe the obvious, we're not the city of Enoch. We have not been lifted up into the heavens because we're perfect, right? And so, if we can understand we're not perfect, then that gives us an opportunity to say, so what needs to shift, right? What needs to shift in our landscape? And that can be done with love and joy and celebration. We're not talking about nastiness here. We're talking about bringing God's spirit of love for one another into the landscape and actively thinking about how we can build Zion.
Yeah. And I think there's two parts to that. I think it's really important to listen to voices that are different than yours, widen that table, bring people to the table that maybe don't get to make these decisions, don't in the past have not had their voice heard. And now I've spaced on my second one.
It was brilliant.
It was. It was lean into your personal revelation. We have connections to our heavenly parents. We have a direct line to talk to them. And I think that we often are fearful to follow that revelation because it's not coming from the prophet or from a church leader. And so we think, oh, well, I shouldn't really say this because that was maybe just meant for me. But I think that our heavenly parents are encouraging us to step out and to do the brave thing. And so I think that we, as we're listening to people that are different from us, that have different perspectives, which is every other person in the world, right? It's if we're listening to them and then we're taking ideas, feelings, thoughts to God, and then we're following that revelation. I think that is a perfect recipe for doing good in the world, for being a change maker. And I love that it is personal and will look different for everybody, because our heavenly parents, as Patrick Mason put it, they're the what was the word? They are the chief officers or chief creators and the chief delighters in the diversity. They made a beautiful symphony of diversity, not only in the world with the plants and the animals, but with humans. We're all so different. And we get to celebrate that beauty and the different perspectives and ideas that we can bring. And if we really embraced all of that, what amazing things could we do in the world? We could make some beautiful change and progress and growth. Because if we're just stagnant, like McArthur was saying at the beginning of this podcast, if we don't think change is important and we think this is how God created it and we're supposed to be here and this is all we've got, there's nothing good about that. No growth will come, no change will come if we've got this stagnant mentality. We're here to grow and to change and to progress. And I think we need to lean into that more.
Sorry, Richard.
I just want to, touch on this concept of how we treat people that leave the church that McArthur brought up, because it's really something I think a lot about. And I've really tried to improve my discipleship by how I treat people. I think it's always been easy for us as Latter-day Saints to be kind to people in other religions. We even have them speak at BYU. But it's harder for us, I'm speaking about myself in the past, something I'm trying to improve, to be kind to people that leave our religion. Sometimes that's very personal. If it's a family member, we maybe even worry doctrinally about our eternal family. But I love what McArthur just talked about, and just some thoughts that in one of the third book I wrote about building the good ship Zion, I did a chapter on how we should treat people that leave the church. And I just, one Relief Society, it wasn't an official Relief Society event, but the Relief Society presidency, a woman in the Relief Society was leaving the church, and she'd been in the ward for a long time in Colorado, and they just felt impressed. Maybe they call this the backyard principle, back to you, but they just had a welcoming, an event for her, thanking for her for all her years of service in that Relief Society. And I just, when I heard that story and we put that in the book, I just thought, what a beautiful story of keeping a relationship intact, keeping friendship intact, recognizing goodness and contribution, even when someone was separating themselves from the church. I think
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Really, really, that's incredible.
I posted, my friend Bryce posted on Facebook, Gay Latter-day Saint, maybe after 8 years of struggling to make it work, just said, I'm leaving. And he wrote, linked to a blog post. And I just felt impressed, maybe using the example of this Relief Society, just to say, Bryce, thanks for all you've done. You've served a mission. You've paid a decade of tithing. There's so many people whose lives are better because of the love you've shown them and helping them feel God's love in their life and Christ. And I just want to thank you for all you've done in the service in our church and extend to you my love and support as you make your way further. And I could have never written that 10 years ago. I felt maybe I was turning my back on the church or I wasn't standing up for truth, but I think I'm just doing what, you two are inviting us to do, is I think a test of our discipleship, bear more in comfort, how we support those that separate themselves from the church. Now, if there's abuse, there's needed a boundary. So this love and support people has limits on, especially if we're in an unsafe situation, and we need a boundary. But often that's not the case with people leaving the church. I think of Elder Gay's talk where he talked about giving a blessing to a sister who was never really active. And he was rebuked by the Spirit by fully not understanding who she was and her unique road, and just sort of leaving that at the Savior's feet and trying to see her sister in her final blessing before she passed as somebody who raised a single family. He built empathy in that talk for people that step away. Elder Uchtdorf did the same thing. Sometimes, listeners, I get discouraged. I listened to everything last General Conference we said about people that separate themselves from the church. It wasn't very kind. And I just think we can do better. And I'm going to harp on this a little bit. I think of David Archuleta, a gay Latter-day Saint who, did so much good for the church for 10 years, including serve a mission, tithing, concerts, beautiful music, contributions, and tried to make it work with a woman. He was engaged several times and was pretty open with his journey and just felt like that wasn't working for him. And he did everything to make it work that I could imagine. And my younger heart would have been judgmental to him. My older heart is just, David, I'm just, take God with you, do it. I'm not going to pass judgment on you. Even if you write songs about going to hell together with your mom, I just recognize that's part of your journey to heal and talk about the pain you felt of trying to make this work. And so that's just a little bit the way I'm processing that. And maybe some people will be uncomfortable with that, but I just think, especially for families, it's the principle is to preserve the relationship, even if we can't control the outcome, and leave it at the feet of our Savior for the next life. So that's a big tangent. I don't know if you want to stay on that tangent or go back to the book.
I have a thought about that, but I add to the heartbreak, the families that cut off family members when they leave or when they come out, or whatever choice, whatever action is being taken. And there's a quote from Harold B. Lee that's talking about the church's scaffolding and the church programs, and he said, we must never let the scaffolding get in the way of the soul. And I think that is so important. As I see people cut off family members and say, we're just not going to acknowledge you anymore because you're living an authentic lifestyle, or whatever it is. I think that is heartbreaking that we have that tendency as humans to put the church first and not acknowledge the soul, the human, the person that is in our family that we love, that we have grown to love. Um, I think that that is one of the areas that we make a huge mistake. There's no other way to say it. It's wrong, I think.
I love you. I agree with that, Anne. You know, a lot of really capable, wonderful women are leaving the church. You two are aware of that. Sounds like you're in groups that talk about it. We have adult daughters that are out of the church. They're bright, capable, contributing society, and they have their reasons, and we love them. But don't. There are some that want to stay, and I don't. And I hope I can ask, what would you? This isn't you talking to those that left, trying to have them come back. Maybe there's some that want to come back and would appreciate what you have to say. But what would you say to women and maybe men that are just, it's really hard for them to stay, and you're two bright, capable women that understand all the issues. You don't have your head in the sand and not aware of all the complicated issues around patriarchy and history, but you still stay. What do you say to people that say, McArthur and Ann, why do you stay? And they're looking for stories, perhaps, or principles that give them perspective or role modeling, because their goal is to stay. They actually want to stay, but they want to do it kind of an authentic way. Are you okay me asking that question? Are you okay answering it?
Yep. Do you want to go first, McArthur?
One of the things that I learned from this woman who I admire is that she said, "It's my church. It's my church." And sometimes I think when people say I have to leave the church, they frame this kind of I'm here and the church is something else, whether the church is an institution or the church is priesthood or their church, like whatever it is that they've framed as other than them. And I remember this woman saying, "It's my church." And so I think that's a really important orientation because it means that everything, me, people, institutions, are works in progress. And as long as I believe that I am part of that change, I'm part of that work in progress, I think that I have patience to believe that I am building the church, right? How I act and the choices I make, like that human beings are the church, human beings are the body of Christ. And so we can all make the church we want to have. So I think about the story. I'm really humbled. I'm very humbled by the story of the celebration by the Relief Society. That's incredibly Christ-like. And the humility of that, to say that we don't know best for her, the humility to say that it's not my place to judge. We've been told bluntly, right? Judge not. Couldn't be more clear than that, right? And I think that I'm just really, really humbled by that um, act. Because if we think about, like, people make their church, we make what that church is going to be. The choice to have that celebration made the tone of that Relief Society, right? So I once did an art show. I do books because I think books need to exist, but I do art because it gives me joy. And I did an art show about Heavenly Mother and the Wise Women. And I interviewed 50 women in my life that had had some sort of moment or interaction or relationship that had changed who I was. And some of those were someone I talked to for 15 minutes, and some of those are people who I'd known my whole life. But and then I created like a beaded piece that exemplified that woman. And one of the pieces I did was I did in the head of the bean, I put Jugdy not, which was a typo for judge not, right? And it was fascinating. A friend of mine lived abroad. She said, "Oh, I want to see your show. I want to see the catalog." So I sent it to her and she said, "Oh, you have a typo." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, please no," right? And so I asked where, and she said, "It's supposed to be judge not." And I just laughed and laughed because I said, "Look actually at the piece of art. It's actually Jugdy, Jugdy not." Because it's such an immediate moment for us to say, here's 50 pieces of beautiful art and completely inspiring women who have changed all the interactions, like the ripple effect, and we noticed the typo, right? I think our brains are trained that way. And so for me, the reason I did this piece of art is because it exemplified this woman I met who was so different than me. I thought she was so different than me. I judged her that she was different than me. And then it turned out that she and I became fast friends. And she was she lived in Delhi. She was my
Mm,
anchor point in Delhi. And I was her anchor point to a crazy, broad Indian world that she didn't have as much
mm,
access to. And she's really good with a KitchenAid, right? I'm actually straight up afraid of KitchenAids. Like if you put me in front of a KitchenAid, I'm gonna be like, oh, bonjour. I don't know where the parts go. I don't know where the accessories hook in. I literally have KitchenAid fear, right? And so like we were really, really different people. She had 9 children. I have 3, right? And so just instead of sitting there and thinking as I was judging her and judging, it wasn't just judging her, I was judging us. I was judging that we couldn't be friends because we were different. And what that woman taught me is that like we could be fast friends and beautiful friends even in this very, very, obvious differences. And so when I did her piece of art, this Jugdy knot, to me, it's this absolute reminder that I don't know Jack, right? Like, I don't know what is driving someone. I don't know who someone is. I don't know their life plan. I don't know why they're making choices. And I think for me, cultivating a sense of humility in the face of someone else's life is what I've been trying to do. And now I'm humbled by your story because it wasn't just humility. Then it was, what do I do with that humility, right? What do I do to be a Christ-like person? I mean, I was on step one, phase one, right? Like choose humility. Phase two maybe is the like, how do I act with Christ-like love to a person who is different than I am, making different choices, but is doing this. And just to bring it all back around, like we are a faith and a church of different people. And so if we're going to be welcoming of all, that includes us and ourselves, that I am welcome in building the church I want to see on this earth. Frankly, I don't want to raise my daughters in the same faith that I was raised in. And that's not a condemnation of the people who raised me well or the people who did their best efforts. It's an acknowledgement that there are things that need to be done differently. And it's not disloyal to have that idea. It's not criticism. It's the idea that we can all always grow, right? That's just an acknowledgement of humankind. And so if we acknowledge we all can grow, then I acknowledge I don't want the same church body that I grew up in to be where my daughters now live. And so I am encouraging of people to say that we have the power to create the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ.
Yeah,
That was a very long answer.
that's wonderful though. Um, I I feel this question kind of deep in my soul because it's a lot of where I live. um, but my husband and I recently went to listen to Nadia Bolz-Weber speak. She's a Lutheran pastor and she came through Utah. Um, and while we were there, we were encouraged to turn to somebody around us and talk to them about to bear our testimony to them. And Nadia was saying, this could be something you're thinking about, a word that drives you, or just tell them what you had for dinner if this is too hard of a thing. And my husband and I are both pretty introverted, and we kind of looked around like, oh, I really don't want to do this. But I thought, no, we're just going to talk. And so I turned around to the couple behind us. They're in their 60s. And we just started talking. And they grew up in an evangelical church. We grew up in the LDS faith. But as we were talking, we realized that we are reading the same authors, we're
mm,
dealing with the same struggles, we're kind of having an evolving faith in very similar ways in our different traditions, but we've met in the middle. And so, long story short, we got their phone number, we went out to
wow.
dinner with them, and this friendship is starting to form. And what it helped me realize is that um, I have placed a lot of weight and heaviness and responsibility and burden on our church, on the way that it's formatted, on the things that have happened or haven't happened, the growth or stagnation or, whatever it is, I've placed a lot of weight on our church. And I'm realizing as I'm listening to people that are different than me, this is not a problem just within our faith. This is a Christian experience. I heard Patrick Mason talking recently about somebody that was kind of going through our history and the struggle with some of the stuff that has happened in the fallibility of our leaders and stuff like that. And this Catholic man said, "Oh, I realize that you're coming to your church expecting perfection and expecting, to have everything right. And I've been dealing with the Catholic faith, and I know that we don't expect everything to be right, and we know that there will be mistakes. And we're such babies in our church compared to the Catholic Church that's been around for centuries." And so I think that as I realize, as I kind of take a step back and realize the issues that we have are human issues. We have revelation and we have inspiration and we have mistakes and we have errors, and that is part of being human. And so I don't have to crumble every time something hard comes, because I can kind of take a step back and see it from a broader perspective and realize, my testimony is not in that topic. It's not in that person. I need to have my focus on Jesus Christ and on what Jesus taught, and things that don't maybe match that. I have a little give and take with that. I can say, well, that's just not for me. I'm not going to put my efforts behind that because it doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel good. And so I am learning to have a little more personal authority with how I do church. I think that I can approach things in a different way instead of putting all my eggs in one basket and saying it is either all true or it is all false. I don't think having that binary is going to serve anybody well. And so I think having just a little more malleability and a little more wiggle room as I try to figure out how to stay in the church, that has really helped me to approach difficult topics. The other thing that helps me is my favorite phrase that I have coined. I know I didn't make it up, but it is now my phrase, is to have grace and space. Give grace and space to everybody. Everyone needs grace for whatever they're trying to do as a human in the church, as a human in the world. We all need to just be given a little grace and space to make the mistakes that we make, to have the successes that we have. We all just need grace and space.
Well, listeners, we're kind of at the hour mark. I'd love to keep talking, but we try to keep these roughly an hour. And we want you to read the book, Changemakers, Women Who Boldly Built Zion, artwork by Jessica Sarah Beach. Way to go, Jessica Sarah Beach.
So beautiful.
This is a book that's big on artwork, too. I'll just summarize quickly some of the things that really jumped out to me. I love this other Kieran talk that Revelation is scattered. Sometimes I get really uncomfortable, listeners. I remember this listening to Black Latter-day Saints in a podcast, and my younger self would say, well, that's the spirit leaving the room. My older self says, is that internalized racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia, that I am hearing things that challenge me? And so I try to sit with that uncomfortableness versus just dismiss it, as I'm trying to, I like Anne's word of racial awakening in different spaces that we can go through that help us be, better supporting other people. So if you feel some of that in these podcasts or when we hear stories, I sit, instead of just dismissing it, sit with it a little bit. I love talking about Melissa Inouye. Thank you for bringing up her name. I will always get emotional every time I hear her name. And one of the questions I'll ask God on the other side, maybe in my first 5 questions, why did you take Melissa and Kate Holbrook? Melissa died on April 23rd, 2024. We're recording this, 14 months after her death. And I love that you talk about her. I hope someday we have a study manual about her and maybe Kate Holbrook and others that we're studying in priesthood meeting in Relief Society. I love this. You've coined a term for me, the backyard principle, own the backyard and what we can do. Let's see, what else did I write down? I love this thought, personal authority and how I do church. And I sometimes wish our church, as I'm an LGBTQ ally and have tried to do so much in this space, I find I do better when I follow what these women are suggesting is just focus on what I can control. And when I get discouraged, I think about, there's no suggestion box. No one's ever reached out to me and said, "What, Brother Osler, what have you learned after meeting 1,000 queer people about what we could do better in the church to support them?" So that's when I get discouraged. When I think of the institution and just, but I can't control or have influence on the institution. So I get encouraged when I meet other people trying to create Zion, better support for women, for people of different races, and queer Latter-day Saints, the three groups that are kind of on my radar map. So maybe that helps you. The three of us, I think, are trying to do what we can in our circle of influence to improve the experience, but also navigating this. So this having personal authority on how I do church is a really terrific principle that I've had to do a little bit of that too. An example of that, I hope this is okay. I don't listen to conference live anymore, listeners. My wife does. I read conference, and it's just a way for me to manage what I might hear that's triggering for me, especially through the lens of how queer people are processing conference. Doesn't mean I don't want to hear what our leaders have to say. Doesn't mean I don't support them. It's just how I manage that. Because it can be because I have anxiety before conference, wondering just what might be said about people that I really care about, or people that, are leaving the church or have left the church, another group I care about. In the show notes, as I mentioned, we'll link to this book, the Amazon link, the Deseret book link. We'll link to Anne's Instagram. If anybody knows Mercedes, find Anne or McArthur. We'll link to McArthur's Instagram and Facebook. We will link to James John's courses that I believe Anne mentioned. Terrific courses. He is a terrific human being, and I'm glad you brought him up. Somebody I deeply admire. I'll also link to a chapter of my third book you can just download for free. It's How We Should Treat People That Leave the Church, since that came up in this topic, if you want to know what I wrote about that. But it's also taking other ideas. But that's kind of all I have to say.
And I'm also going to have you link to Heavenly Mother Matters, an Instagram account for people who are interested in studying Heavenly Mother aligned with the gospel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if someone's interested in being involved with that, just getting the content on Instagram or in participating in different events that we're doing, volunteering, we're happy to have people. So I'll give you that link as well.
Yeah, especially if you can help the Restore booth. I think those kind of an invitation, if that's...
Please.
Reach out. I think that's in September, so there's a little time to... Restore is terrific, and the people that are putting that together are awesome. Any final comments from each of you? Well, I'm going to ask you to give final comments, so you can decide the order.
I don't know that I have much to say. I'm super grateful that we were able to be on here. And I think that these sorts of conversations are the meat and beauty of the gospel. I think this is what I love, is being able to talk with people that care about things that are important, and that we just can all have a passion and a drive and work to build the beloved community together. So thank you.
Yeah. I would say this book and this podcast is an invitation to celebrate change, that to see change as good and necessary and beautiful, that change is not opposed to God. I think that's an important idea, and an invitation to someone be a change maker if there's something that they're passionate about. So thank you for having us.
McArthur, Krishna, Anne Pimentel, and Richard Osler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.